Hello ladies and gentlemen, Strom here. Welcome back to another Redstone video. I just wanted to review with you some circuits that are good to know for when you start getting into technical Minecraft. So these aren't going to be how to actually apply them, but how these circuits work. So let's get into it. What I have here is 16 setups of, I guess concepts would be a better word than circuits to go over. And these are good things to know if you wanted to start getting into techno Minecraft, or maybe not necessarily even into technical, but you just want to make some of your own farms and want to make them work around your build. And you have a really cool castle that you need something to turn a corner, but the tutorial for the farm that you watched didn't show anything about how to do that. So we're going to review these and how these work. And we're going to be doing some of these in slow motion as well, so you can kind of see them broken down and get a better understanding for them. So first thing to review is hopper lag. As you may or may not know, hoppers actually cause a decent bit of lag because what they're doing is when they're just sitting there the entire time, every single tick, they are checking if they should be picking up something. And if you have a large design where you start putting a lot of hoppers, or you want to move stuff across distances, maybe a large item sorter, what's going to happen is those hoppers are going to start to add up, and you're going to start lagging out your game, dropping your FPS, maybe skipping ticks, making it run slower, maybe breaking some of your redstone designs, something like that. So what we have here is on top of these hoppers is actually a composter. And what a composter does when you place it on top of a hopper, a composter can produce one bone meal, so it only has one possible inventory slot. So this hopper, instead of checking the entire chunk that it's sitting in, is just checking this one hopper, one inventory slot. So it doesn't reduce it down to 0, but it reduces it significantly. So in this example here, we were taking something from a chest over to another chest using a hopper line and putting these composters on top of it, since nothing needs to fall into the hoppers here, is going to help reduce that out. So if you are doing a build with a lot of hoppers that don't need to gather something, consider putting some composters on there. Furnaces can also help because they have that small inventory space in them. But if, putting a thing like a chest on it would slightly reduce it, but you're already talking about 27 inventory slots there. So at that point, just get into the composter or the furnace. They're both cheap, cobblestone or wood slabs. Next thing to talk about is hopper locking. So if you don't have the opportunity to put a composter on a hopper and you have a bunch of them and you still want to use them, a way that you can actually reduce the lag from those is called locking. So here I have a lever that's on a block right next to a hopper, and inside that chest is a bunch of items, but you'll see nothing is flowing through that hopper, and that's because this redstone signal in this block is locking this hopper. If I was to turn that off, we'd start to see items flowing through there steadily going down to the bottom of the chest. When I turn that back on, then the hopper locks. It stops sending its items through or taking items in. Same thing here with this redstone block. If I was to take this away, we'd see items start flowing through, and once that block gets put back, it's now locked. So giving a redstone signal to a hopper locks it, and it will no longer check to whether or not it's supposed to take in or out anything. Another good thing to know if you want to start getting into this is some short clocks. These are small, compact. They just work on ticking back and forth. One of the really fast ones right here is it's called an observer clock. So basically I'm taking two observer faces, putting them into each other. And then when they face each other, you're going to see they're just going to tick constantly back and forth. They're going to update each other back and forth and make this clock and shoot out items pretty fast, or, fire off a piston fast, whatever functionality you need that redstone clock for. Turn that one off. We also have one over here. This is a basic clock that has a little bit of timing that you can increase on it. So if I do this, that's its fastest speed for this style of clock. And then I can slow it down a little bit. You could put a couple more repeaters in there. But this is just if you just need a very specifically short time clock, you can use this way and configure it up a little bit. Next thing we have here is called a monostable input or a monostable circuit. You could also refer to it as just a short pulse. And what this is going to do is this wooden button, it stays depressed for a little while and gives off a signal while it's down. But you may have a system where you just want a quick pulse to get through to the system. So what we're doing here is this repeater is going to get a signal from this button. It's going to power this block, which is then going to power this piston and push it upwards. And it's going to send a signal before it gets pushed upwards through this redstone. But as soon as it gets pushed upwards, it can no longer send a signal through there because the piston that's extended doesn't transmit the signal, and this turns right back off. So I'll do this once really quick here. Boom, we can see that just goes through real quick. So even though the button stays down, and I'm going to use the carpet mod to actually slow this down and run this in slow-mo so we can see what this is doing. So this is tick rate 2 instead of 20, so this is 10 times slower than normal. When I press that button, we can see that's happening almost instantly there. Even though this is extended for a long period of time because we're in slow-mo, that signal goes through real quick, but then really quickly turns off, so it's very fast. What we have here is a pulse extender. What this does is it turns a short signal into a longer signal. This method right here is called the comparator pulse extender. So we're using a couple of comparators in this redstone loop to extend the signal longer. And what we're going to see happen with this texture pack that I have is these signals are down at 0, and we're going to actually be able to see it reducing as it goes around. So I'm going to do this a couple of times in normal speed. We can see their button is undepressed, but yet everything stays powered. And now let's do this in slow speed. We can see here we have 14 coming out, 14 coming out here. This is getting turned back into 15 because of the button, but as soon as the button comes back out, it goes to 13, and we're going to see it's going to go around and slowly reduce as it goes around those cycles. You know, we're down at 7, 5, 3, 1, and now the redstone signal is gone. This right here is an auto dropper. There are a couple of ways to do this. One of them involves this observer clock like I have set up on a piston. Another type is using an actual comparator clock. I'm just going to show off this, but basically the concept is once you put items in, they fall into the dropper, and then the comparator notices that there's items inside of there, and then immediately sets off a clock to then start spitting the items back out of the dropper. Now in this case here, we can see it's kind of going back and forth like that. So this would be much better for something that had a slow input into the dropper. You could use something that would stabilize that and extend that out a little bit longer, but that's the basic concept is once the comparator senses something in the dropper, it sets off a clock that then forces this to start spitting out all its items. Once it's empty, the comparator no longer has a signal, and then this all turns off. These right here are some basic item filters. I have two different models here. There is one right here which is extremely popular. It's often referred to as the T sorter or the 41 sorter. And then we have one over here which is a little bit more compact. As you can see, it's one block less wide and it uses less items inside the filter. But this version right here is not tileable if you're going to have any sort of overflow. Okay, if you're going to have really fast input, then this is going to be the method for you for sure. Or if you want to tile it and guarantee that nothing's going to overflow, this is the way to go for you. Because what would happen is if this chest was to fill up and then fill up into this hopper, then suddenly it would start setting off everything else that was next to it if it was tiled. But this one can be tiled one right next to the other. And basically, yeah, that's what tileable means. It's just you can put them right next to each other and they won't interfere with the other tiles next to them. So the way that these sorters work is there is, as you can see, a hopper facing into a comparator. And inside of that hopper, the first slot is the item that you want to filter out, and then some other items that are named something else, so that, say in this example, cobblestone is named a filter. If you had cobblestone coming through this hopper line up here, it wouldn't get sucked down into these slots because it would have to be a piece of cobblestone named filter in order to stack in here. What this is going to do is as soon as this hits one more redstone dust, so this would get up to 42, this is now going to send out a signal strength of 3. This is going to extend down here, which is then going to turn on this repeater because this block will be powered to turn on this repeater. This repeater goes into this block, which then turns off this redstone torch. And just like that hopper locking we talked about earlier, then unlocks this hopper because this block is no longer powered and lets item go down to the chest. So let me just put some more redstone in there. And we can see now, see this is signal strength 3. It goes 1, 3, 2, 1, turns that on, turns this torch off, and it's now letting items come through those hoppers. This version right here, again, does the same thing. This is really only if you have a space constraint in your build. Again, do not tile this if it's any possibility that you'll get some overflow, because this can just cascade break It's pretty crazy. But what this is doing is it's using the same concept, but instead of having 41 items, you're just having 6 of those items inside that hopper. And then you have items that stack to 16. So in this case, I have signs because they only stack to 16. You could also use like chicken eggs or ender pearls, something like that. Something else that stacks to 16, so that this is giving out a certain signal strength. What these comparators are doing is they're not measuring how many items are in there. So it's not measuring I have 10 items in there. It's measuring what percentage full is this container. So an item that stacks to 16 would basically count as 4 items for an item that stacks to 64. So this is just calculating how full is this container that I'm comparing, not how many items are in there. And that determines what signal strength it gives out. So in this case, it's only giving out a signal strength of 1. If I was to go in here and I was to put a bunch more repeaters in there, we're going to see it's actually now giving off a signal strength of 4 and 3. That's enabling this. But again, if there was something next to this, it would have gone 2 and then 1 and just taken a couple of slices out of your system. So don't tile this one. This one, by all means, tile. If you want more information on item sorters, I have another full video on that on my YouTube channel. You can go check that out. And put composters on top of those hoppers. This is a hopper clock that was invented by a user called Etho, and this is one of the most configurable clocks in the game. So you can fill up this hopper as much or as little as you want to give it as much or little delay as you want to. But what this is doing is it's using that hopper locking we talked about and the comparators to look at how full is this container to say, should I have a block over this one and not allow items to leave it, or should the block be over this one and not allow items to leave it? What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this lever, which is then going to allow this redstone block to move over, and items are going to start moving through. So as we can see, they're moving over to this hopper, but not back to this hopper because this one is locked. And this one is only set with 16 items in there. You can go up to 5 stacks of 64 stackable items. If you really wanted, you could put in like 2 items and make this really short. But that's... At that point, you might want to consider another type of smaller clock, as this one does require a few more resources. You got a couple of sticky pistons, you got a couple of comparators there. But this is really meant for when you need a configurable clock that just fits you perfectly. Basically, each item that you put in there, so in this case we had 16, each item is going to do 2 game ticks of delay. Correction, 4 game ticks of delay. Because what's going to happen with this clock is if you were to take a signal out of one of these sides, so I'll just do this real quick right here where I'm going to take this and then a repeater, not a blue concrete block, but a repeater. And so I want a signal to come out whenever the redstone block is on this side. What's actually going to happen is it takes 2 ticks for it to go over to the other hopper, but then it takes another 2 ticks for all to come back. So each item I put in there is 4 game ticks of delay on the clock. This is what is referred to as a T flip-flop, and just what that stands for is a toggleable flip-flop. So basically you're flipping and flopping the state that it's in. So in this case, we have some redstone lamps. So we want to flip back and forth between on and off. But most of the times in Minecraft, the redstone activators, such as buttons or pressure plates, once you push them, they stay on and then they turn off. So pushing that button wouldn't keep this on. Now we could use a lever here in this instance, but we're looking for more things where you'd want to have maybe a longer standing flip-flop that you wanted to have maybe at a control center or something like that. There are plenty of uses for this. And this is going to work off of the principle that sticky pistons, when they get a 1-tick pulse, will either push the block that's attached to them and leave it there, or if there's a block in front of them, we'll reach out and pull it back. So we're going to use that to flop the state. The toggle. So in this case, we're using a monostable circuit right here, as we talked about before, to actually send a 1-tick pulse into that sticky piston, and then it's going to drop off its redstone block here and power that redstone dust in that lamp. We'll do that right here. And we can also use that with a note block or something on an observer that the observer detects it going off once, and then it's going to release that block. Let me do that real quick in slow motion. Here we press the button. See the signal goes in pretty quick, comes out, and immediately drops off. So that all happens very quickly, even at 10 times slower speed than normal. And same thing here. So it's a very quick system to do a flip-flop with using one of these two. This is a flying machine, and in my personal opinion, one of the most difficult concepts to figure out when you're starting out with Redstone or Techno Minecraft. Because if you just look at this at normal speed, it just looks kind of crazy. Like, I push a button and then something just starts moving across the screen. What the heck happened? Who knows? What's going on? How do I do this? But let's break this down, and I'm actually run this in super slow speed. What's going to happen is we have two slices here, okay? We have two slices. So one of these slices is going to push this slice forward one. It's going to turn on this observer and then cause this one to go back, and then it's going to pull back the other slice to it, which then kicks this off, causes it to push forward. So it's just going to be pushing back and forth, and we're going to see that go in slow motion here right now. So that pushed forward. This one now kicks off to pull it back to it. That sets this one off, pushes it forward. This sets this one off, pulls it back. That sets this one off. And it goes on and on like that until it hits a unmovable block, or it hits push limit, or something where the flying machine can't move anymore. As you could see, this observer still kicked off even when it hit this, but it didn't actually go anywhere because this module could no longer be pushed forward because it hit the obsidian. Flying machines can be made in many different shapes, but it all works on the same basic premise, is you are using an observer to set off a one-tick pulse on a sticky piston that will then push one module forward and then cause the other module to pull it back to it. So, you know, we can do this shape, or I've done some videos on flying machines as well, where there are other things that you can use it for. So check that out on the Learn Redstone playlist on my channel if you want to see more on flying machines. This is what we call a dropper vader. So this is a series of droppers. Again, this just has an arrow on it because of the texture pack that I'm using from Vanilla Tweaks, just to make the redstone items a little bit easier to read when they're not facing anywhere. But these are droppers that are just facing upwards into each other. And what we're going to do is when an item comes in, this is going to automatically send these up to the top. Another way you could do this is with a bubble column of soul sand and an auto dropper like we covered over there. But this way it's silent, it's completely lossless because everything is just moving from container to container, not moving across air blocks or water blocks or through glass or anything like that. So what this is doing is that same concept with the auto dropper is there's a comparator here to sense, do I have an item inside of this dropper? And then what it's going to do is it's going to set off this little hopper clock just once. There's just one item in it. It's just going to set it off once, which is then going to set off this line of torches. And what this line of torches is going to do is send a signal upward because a redstone torch has a slight delay of when it gets sent up. And I'll show that in a minute in slow motion. But what we have here is basically just put in any item. It's going to start moving it up to the top and spinning it out. So we can see those items are moving in. They're moving in faster than they're going up the dropper vader. So this is not hopper speed. But you can see the only click I have is up top, and actually if I was to put a chest here, it would then be completely silent. These items just shoot into the chest without that. Let me turn this into slow motion so we can see how that torch tower is working. So once again, we are at 10 times slower speed, but you can see each time those signals are going up those torches at a short delay. So as an item falls in here, it then gets shot up to here, and then shot up to here, shot up to here, shot up to here, shot up here and out. This, again, like most of the things in this video, are not my actual design. They are things that I have learned over the years, and unfortunately I don't exactly recall where I learned this one, but this is what the important thing to remember is right here, this signal setting it off. You could also do this other ways. If you want to do like a slower clock, for instance, if you wanted to slow down the output from this without slowing down the game, would be to then make a comparator clock that shoots it out, or maybe use one of the dropper style clock that I used over there with the observers. But basically instead what you're going to be doing is you're going to be turning off this torch instead of directly powering the dropper, and then it's going to go all the way up to the top here. You want to make sure you're not using dispensers for this. You're definitely using droppers, because otherwise if you were to pop in, let's say an arrow, they'll change this from a dropper to a dispenser and then put arrows in. What we're going to see is what's going to start happening is instead of depositing it, it's going to start shooting it. However, maybe that's what you actually want. I don't know what you would use this for. I don't know why you would need to load in arrows down here. Go up there. This is just a short version though. This could go, you know, all the way up to here, 50 blocks, 80 blocks, whatever you need to do. That can be a really long distance dropper vader, and it'll still be silent all the way up. I was talking about, can you stop? Yeah, that's why you want a dropper, not a dispenser. These are 3 different models of smart pistons, and what a smart piston does is as soon as there is a block in front of its face, it pushes the block out of the way and then resets itself to prepare for another block to come in. So in this instance, if I put a block here, this redstone torch is going to power the block. The signal is going to go over to this dust, come up here, and then power this piston to go off. So just like that. Now that's decently fast, but there is also a 0-tick piston, and this is actually the wrong way around. My bad. And basically that means that it's happening with everything in the same tick, so it's really fast. And the way that that's working is this piston is getting set off, which is also setting off this piston through the same dust line. And this piston gets pushed out, but then this piston says, wait, I shouldn't be pushed out because I just got an update from below, and I now realize I'm not powered, so I retract. This one does it to the other one. They do it to each other, basically, so it goes really fast. So even if I were to slow this down, you're not going to see much difference in the slow speed. You'll see how fast it actually happens all at the same time. So this is 10 times slower than normal speed, and even then, it's still looking instant because this is all happening in the same game tick. So no matter how much I slow it down, this is going to look the same. Now, we do see that those are disappearing for a brief second there. That's just artifacting from the way that the game is and the fact that I'm running it this slow. Those pistons aren't actually going anywhere. And this model right here is very similar to this one over here, but this would work more if you had a scenario where maybe blocks needed to fall on top of something. And on this torch here, like a gravity block like sand or gravel would just break if it fell on there, but if it landed here, it would be fine, and then boom, it just gets pushed out that same way. So using this redstone repeater to send a signal through to this redstone, which then activates the piston and pushes it out of the way. These are double piston extenders. These are some of the basic models of this. There are a lot of different ways to do double piston extenders, but the basic concept is you get some pistons to push a block 2 spaces instead of just 1. This could be used for, you know, maybe doors in your base, or you have a farm where you got to get a couple blocks out of the way, something like that. Decorative purposes, you know, you want to have something that looks cool where a block seems to float in the air from out of the ground, something like that. And what we have here is a horizontal double piston extender, excuse me. This is working off of using a repeater delay to make sure that the pistons get their tick. And this one here is using an observer and a repeater to tick that off as well. So this works off the concept of first, this piston is going to push out the piston and the block. So it's going to move those both forward 1. And then this piston is going to push out the block 1 more. Then when we pull it back, this piston is going to retract, bring back the block. This piston is then going to reach out, grab this piston, pull it back. And then this piston is once again going to reach out and pull the block back to it. So do this a couple times at normal speed. And now let's slow that down. So we can watch as we see these signals based on these repeaters going in slower and at different rates. So on the first extension, this middle repeater doesn't really matter. It's when we retract that we need to worry about this one. Because what happens is this one is already on, it gets pushed in by this one, and then this pushes forward. So once I turn this off, we're going to see that what's going to happen is that signal turns off. This piston gets pulled back, but then because this repeater is still on, when this gets pulled back, it immediately pushes back out and then pulls this block back to it. Do that once again in slow motion. And you can see it happens very quick, even though, once again, we are at 10 times slower than normal game speed. That's pretty quick. Same thing over here. We send a signal into this repeater, which then powers this piston. And then we're going to use this observer to then power the piston that's up here next to it. So let me do this in slow motion. And then once again, we need to pull the block back down. So we'll do that again. Let me go ahead and do that in normal speed so you can see how fast this actually works. Pretty quick. And those are just a couple of models. I don't have any videos on double piston extenders, so if you have a farm or a build or something like that that needs it to go in a specific direction or be a specific style, please do some Googling on double piston extenders, because there are a lot of different models out there. I know very recently Reddit kind of went off the rails on everyone was making their own double piston extender model. Another good thing to talk about is the properties of slime and using them to push stuff. So in this example here, this is a slime launcher that would launch a player up. So if I was to just walk over here and walk onto it, it actually launches me the player, because slime, when it gets pushed by a piston, whatever is touching it or whatever it runs into will then gain momentum. So you can see me as the player. Here's kind of more of a survival example. If you have like a hole in your floor down to your basement, and then to get back up, instead of using stairs, you just walk on and boom, you walk out, land on there. And then to get down, you just jump down in the slime. You can also use this to push around items. So I'll just drop an item there, and we can see that now I'm using ice. That's going to push that with some momentum. So you can use that to push around items in the nether, for example, because you can't use water to push around items. So you can have them drop right in front of the slime block and then push out the slime block, push them across a nice path. That can move items around in another farm. Or let's face it, sometimes the most fun application of redstone is just goofing around. And this next bit right here is one of, in some communities, the controversial topics of TNT dupers. So me personally, I do use TNT dupers, and what they're doing is they're not duping the TNT block in an inventory. They're just creating a copy of a lit TNT and a TNT block, so you get both the TNT dropping, plus the next time it can still drop another one. The reason that I am okay with this, and I've asked a few people about when they decide that it's okay to use a glitch and when it's not, is does Mojang intend to patch this at all? And specifically with TNT duping, this has been covered multiple times by one of their lead devs of it's not an ideal solution, but it fits the game as they have it right now. So until they came up with another solution for this, they support TNT duping. So we're going to go into some of these TNT duping modules. These can be really useful for a whole bunch of farms, say like tree farms where trees are shooting out the side. Instead of having to chop them down, use TNT to blow it up. Or you could do a mushroom farm. You could do a cobblestone farm. You could build Ilmango's blast chamber. You could build one of Glotz's crazy ass mushroom farms and push everything in and then blow it all up too. You know, there's a lot of things that TNT can be useful for, and these are a few different models. But TNT duping is working off of one main principle. Is what we have is we are moving a TNT block that updates with a dead coral fan that causes it to both drop a piece of lit TNT and keep the original piece of TNT behind. So in this instance right here, what we're using on all of these, and I know there are other ways, this is the main way I know, is having a detector rail on top above the TNT, or having the TNT next to the block, basically having the TNT touching the block that's being powered by the detector rail with a minecart on top of it. And what we're going to do is this particular model right here, when we push this, it's going to push the TNT in the direction of the dead coral fan. And because of the way that the game updates happen, again, is how I understand it, it's actually going to both tell the game to drop a lit TNT, then afterwards say, wait, I should have a TNT next to me because the TNT was pushed here. So let me just push this real quick. So this happens on the push. It drops a piece of TNT, but doesn't happen on the retraction. My line. Push, but not on the retraction. This one right here, same basic idea, but instead of putting the coral fan in front of the TNT, it's now behind the TNT. So this one won't duplicate on the push, but will duplicate on the retraction. So not on the push, yes on the retraction. I'm just making a mess here. This one right here is a model that I saw, remember correctly, it was on a Mango's channel. Again, I apologize that I don't exactly remember where all this stuff came from that's in my head, but it's just kind of there at this point. But this one will actually drop 2 pieces of TNT on the retraction. So we have 2 pieces of TNT, one each above a coral fan, and then we pull it back, and it's going to drop 2 pieces of TNT that are going to explode at the same time. So as you know, if lit TNT goes off next to another piece of lit TNT, it will push it through the air, or launch it through the air, essentially. But if those are going off at the exact same time, like on this model, they don't have the opportunity to push each other because they're both already exploding. And this model right here is one where we have a dead coral fan behind the TNT and in front of the TNT. So this is going to duplicate whether we push or pull. Every time we move this, it's going to dupe a piece of TNT and drop it. Now, these can be also really useful if you want to get some perimeters dug out, or you want to get yourself a hole down in bedrock, or like I saw being done on the SciCraft Peaceful series, is actually digging out a cave, is just by putting a T and duper on a clock and having it repeat over and over again. And I'm actually going to just do that real quick with an observer clock. So now it's going to drop a whole bunch of TNT out and get you a really deep hole really quickly. And like I was saying about the example from the Peaceful series, let's say I wanted to now get a big underground interior dug out. So as we can see here, we have a nice big hole underground being dug out. You could use this if you want to do an underground storage or an underground base. Set this up and let this run for a while, and it's going to kind of take care of itself. As you can see, this is just from running it for a little bit, and I didn't even do anything with the platform to make it efficient on how I was shooting everything about. But there we go. You know, you can start your underground base here. You got like a bat cave going on. And last but not least, if you want to start getting into large redstone builds, and this is something that I have recently started incorporating and learning. I'm still learning this. But this is fairly important, is doing redstone without redstone. So doing redstone without using redstone dust, because dust also creates a certain amount of lag, just like the hoppers that we talked about before. And there are ways to eliminate that so that you're not dealing with those problems. Another one of the benefits, as we can see here, is redstone dust is not necessarily tileable unless you're controlling the signal strength. If you wanted to have a certain scenario where you wanted to have switches that were going in a line from each other, these are a couple of options that don't affect the slices next to them. What we have here is we have some observers that are going to power a powered rail. And then the observer at the end of that is going to detect the on-off state of that powered rail. So it's not using any dust on these. And powered rails can be powered up to 9 blocks long. So we can have this up to 9 blocks. If you wanted to extend this, you could then just put an observer every 10th block. So observer, 9 powered rails, observer, 9 powered rails, observer, 9 powered rails. But what we'll see is when I push this button, the only one that ticks off is that one in the center there. Now on the right, just the right, and the one on the left, just the left. And I'll stand up here a little bit so you can see that kicks off that rail really quickly. And then the other observer is detecting it. Here we're using slime and honey lines, and you can alternate slime and honey without them sticking next to each other. But then also on the end of it, I have a redstone block. So based on the position of that redstone block, whether it's retracted like it is now or extended like it will be in a moment, that's going to then control it. So I'm going to push this button here. We're going to see that's going to push that one off. Same here in the center. It's not interfering with each other. So even though this is more expensive to get these things than just laying down some redstone dust, your performance is going to be much better with it. So you can throw it on redstone dust, but think of it like spending performance points. Whereas this, you're going to spend Minecraft materials, but save on some performance points. This is another method of transmitting redstone signals. As you can see, it's super clean and beautiful. I'm kidding, of course. But this can kind of snake around crazy directions. It can go really long. There's no worries about signal strength or anything. What this is this is an observer line. So it's just a series of observers that are detecting the state of the observer before it, and then moving on through this crazy snake. And the only reason I did this snake is to show that you can go around some really weird paths that maybe Redstone would have some difficulty snaking through. But we can have this here when I push this button, and we are going to see this signal go through because, again, I have this Vanilla Tweaks texture pack where I can see the signals going through each side of the observer. It still only shoots out a signal through the back side, but it's just changing the side so I can see easier what's going on. So when I press this button, we can see that signal snaking through and gets all the way to the lamp. It's also completely silent, and it can go, like I said, in any shape that you can think of. Sometimes really tight turns are a little difficult that maybe dust would be a little bit better suited for, but this doesn't have to worry about its state all the time like a redstone dust does, because it's just a block that has an on-off state. This is a concept that I saw in a Mango video where it's talking about redstone things that weren't really redstone things, but are redstone things. I think that was the official title of the video. No, it's not. But this is a series of leaves, and leaves check how far they are from a log. And if they change that, an observer can change. So if I push this log forward, we can now see it go through there. It's really nice because it's a really quick signal going through. It's much faster than that observer line, but it does still have a delay on each of those bushes. So this is not an instant line, but maybe you can use it. You got a party going on, you throw some lights on there, and whatever you can think of for that. Or you can just use a observer to detect the last line in it, and say maybe you want to move some redstone signals around. You can do this vertically, horizontally, left, right, and you're in a scenario where maybe you're building a tree or something like that, or a very organic looking pretty build that you don't want to have any redstone displaying. You can use this, and it's much easier to then just hide that one observer at the end than hiding this entire thing, because now it's just a bush, but it still sends a signal through. And before I move on, sending signals through was the wrong terminology. It's not sending a signal, it's sending a state change to each of these leaves, and the observer is generating the actual signal at the end. Last but not least, we have something here which CFlowLow definitely knows is better. That is the observer wall, and what we have here is we have a 3-wide wall and an observer here on the side that's looking at this bottom piece of wall. And if I was to put a wall on top, we're now going to get that pillar effect going all the way down to the bottom, and that observer detects that state change. So this also happens immediately as well. If I was to put this in slow motion, we're going to see that as soon as that moves over, it's still going to change the state of the entire wall. So it doesn't slowly cascade down kind of like the leaves did. It's going to be instant. So you could build this 250 block tall 250 block tall wall, and it would still send a signal instantly down to the bottom. So once again, this is at 10 times lower speed. That still happened almost instantly. There's a couple of ticks in between there, but for essential purposes, it's basically an instant downwards redstone signal. And this is a method that we refer to called observer walls. And again, CFlow knows all about how much better they are. That's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you were able to learn something. Like I said, check out my other redstone tutorials. A lot of those farms that I do aren't necessarily about the farm, but more about the circuits that are involved in them. So if you want to learn more about redstone circuits, by all means, please check that out. You can learn more. And this world will be available in the video description as a world download, as it originally was, not after I blew the crap out of it and just turned everything into what appears to be a Willy Wonka show going on. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one. Bye.